She walked through the house, tears streaming down her face, as silent as her feet on the wooden floor. She knew it was cold, knew it should be cold, but couldn't feel it. She hadn't been able to feel anything for so long. Her life was barely even a memory now, a few impressions of light and warmth, smiling faces and open, welcoming arms. She had been happy, that much she knew. Happy with the man who was her husband, happy with their baby son. One of her clearest memories was of him happily gurgling up at her from her safe arms. She had been happy and she had been loved, but that was all in the past now. Now she simply wandered, lost but also not, trapped in her own house for decades past her time, doomed to haunt the hallways forever, doomed to terrify generation after generation of children when they saw her sleek, shining figure in the moonlight, tears streaming down her face and blood streaming down her dress. For it was only the children who could see her. Something in their innocent and carefree nature resonated at odds with her own guilt and condemnation, making her visible to them at night. She was still there during the daylight hours, still wandering. The halls ran through rapidly, playing their games of chase or sobbing at some small problem which to them was the end of the world. She was unable to deny that she would no longer be able to gather them up and comfort them at these times. Longed to be able to touch them even, a gentle hand on the shoulder to reassure them that everything would be fine tomorrow, to do all the things she never had a chance to do with her own child, but that was all her own fault. And neither she had been able to deny that fact. She knew that this was her punishment for her actions, forever to see and crave but never to experience. For who was she to deserve that luxury? She was nobody. She was nothing. Maddie lay on her belly, idly doodling flowers in the afternoon sunlight. Her granny had given her new pencils to color with, and she had experimented with all the new colors and picked out her very favorites. Hearing a slight creak behind her, she looked over and stood expecting to see her older brother waiting to torment her, but no one was there. Maddie was very happy about this. She hated Luke, and often wished he would leave her alone. Focusing on her pretty flowers once again, Lucia began to think about this big, old house that they had moved into just days before. Luke had tried to tell her it was haunted, but she was big enough now to know that she was just tricking her, and trying to make her be scared of the dark again, like she was when she was little. There was another creak behind her, but again no one was there. "Luke, stop being annoying!" she yelled for good measure, just in case he was the next in the room trying to scare her. She knew she would show him, and that she knew it was him, and not some stupid ghost that he'd made up. A few minutes later, Maddie stood up and took her picture through down to the living room, where her mummy was feeding her new baby brother. "Look what I drew, Mummy!" Maddie exclaimed proudly. Her mother looked at the picture, and Maddie's favorite smile lighted up her face. "That's lovely, sweetie," she said sincerely before leaning over and kissing her on the forehead. Maddie felt a glow of pleasure. "Do you want to go pin it on the fridge so Daddy can see it when he gets home?" Maddie thought this was a very wonderful idea, instantly running into the kitchen and sticking her picture to the fridge with her very favorite magnet. It was a rainbow of all the color with a happy sunshine peeking out from behind it. She stuck it up as high as she could reach, standing on her very tiptoes to put it up before running back into the kitchen. "Done," she cried out, and she ran back into the living room. Her mother smiled lovingly at her. "Turn on the television for sweetie," her mother said, standing up with the baby. "I'm just going to put James to sleep." James. The name ran through her head. James. That was his name, forgotten for so long and brought to the fore again now, as she stood in the living room watching her mother and child interact. James. Love swelled in her chest. James. Her little darling, the beloved of her heart, created from the love between herself and her husband. James. She stretched out her hand as the woman walked past, holding the drowsy child close to her chest protectively. James. Maddie woke up later that night thirsty. She crept out of the bedroom and down to the kitchen to get a glass of water waiting for her in the fridge. As she opened the door, she saw her picture again. Her daddy loved that picture, picking her up and spinning her around and around in the air above him as she giggled manically. She was so very happy. Glugging down the water, she set a half-empty glass back in the fridge. She began to make her way back to the bedroom when she saw a woman in a dress standing and looking at James' half-open door. It wasn't her mommy. Her mommy had blonde hair, not blackest black like this lady. "Hello," she said quietly, confused as to who this strange person was in her house. The lady looked back over her shoulder at Maddie and smiled a small, sad smile. Maddie saw that she was crying, tears streaking her pale white cheeks. She looked away for a second, a little embarrassed that the lady was so upset. When she looked back, the lady had gone. She could have gone into Jane's room. Maddie wanted to make sure the lady was okay, so she walked through the door herself and saw the lady standing between the window and the crib. She had her hands up to her throat. She was looking at the baby like Mommy did. Seeing her, the lady spoke. "I just want James back. I just want to look after him." She looked Maddie right in the eyes. "You'd understand, wouldn't you, if I just took him to keep me company?" Her voice was willowy soft and lighting, seeming like the whisper of the wind through the trees. Maddie was confused. Her voice was soothing, but she just was talking about taking James away, and James was Mommy and Daddy's, and her and Luke's. "No," she said with a quaver. "He's ours. You can't take him. I'm going to get my daddy." Maddie backed towards the door. All softness fell away from the woman's face as she threw her hands out in front of her. The door slammed closed behind Maddie, who could now see the blood streaming down the lady's dress from a few narrow cuts in her chest. She turned, screaming, and tried to open it, to no avail, no matter how hard she tugged. "Daddy, Daddy!" she screamed in pure terror. Her daddy would rescue her. He loved her and wouldn't let her down. "I'll take him. You can't stop me," shrieked the lady. Maddie turned to look at her once more, tears now also running down her face. The lady's face no longer made her sad. Instead, it made her scared. "Daddy!" she screamed once more, when she saw the flash of metal in the hand of the scary lady. "He's mine," she whispered viciously, before slashing down once with the blade. Maddie screamed once more for her daddy, wrenched open the door, and gathered her up in her arms. Holding her safe and secure, she sobbed into his arms, clutching tight to him in pure terror. She risked one more glance at the lady, wondering why Daddy wasn't shouting at her. She saw the lady, but now was holding James. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Daddy, don't let her take James." "Who? Don't let who take James?" he asked. "The lady, the nasty crying lady. Why couldn't he see her? She's standing there, and she has James. And she said she was going to take her away, but I said she couldn't because he was ours." The lady, her daddy picked her up and carried her towards the crib. "Shh, sweetheart, it's okay. James is right." He trailed off as he reached the crib and looked down to see blood pooling around his infant son from a wound in his chest. She walked through the house, tears streaming down her face, as silent as the feet on the wood floor. She knew it was cold, knew it should be cold, but couldn't feel it. She hadn't been able to feel anything for so long. She had been alone for so long. Her husband had killed her for killing their son. She hadn't meant to. It had been an accident, but he had killed her anyways, her sorrow and horror dooming her to haunt the hallways of their house for decades past her time. She wasn't alone now. She had her son back in her arms, someone to look after and to care for. Her tears were joyful now, at having a little body to hold her chest protectively.